Welcome, Wargamers, to the Hour of Ruin here in the Mortal Realms, because today we are talking about the Vermindoom, the cataclysmic event that has just begun to rock the Mortal Realms in this new chapter of AOS. Now, the surprise was a bit spoiled when we saw the explosion in the Adepticon preview event for the release of 4th edition, but it's no less epic. Recently on my channel, I did a Story Thus Far video, which kind of ends on this event. And so in this video, I wanted to take a moment to explore it just a bit more. Because while, this chapter in the next, narrative arc of AOS began with the explosion in Akshi, while we're in it now, we need to have a greater understanding of how this affects the entire setting. Which to me, ultimately is the question here in this video. Like when Nagash did the Necroquake thing and made the Nadir, obviously it changed the landscape of Shyish. But it was coupled with a titanic, blast of magic that hit every corner, and that's why we have endless spells. But what is it about the Skaven, the sudden supremacy and their tearing apart of Akshi? What does that mean for everybody else? And so in this video, we're going to chat about that exact thing. Really quick up top though, if you are looking at any kind of Age of Sigmar stuff, or hobby supplies that your local store does not carry, please consider using the affiliate link in my link tree down below. You'll see exactly how much money you save, and every single time you do, it goes directly to supporting me, my wife, our cats, the whole thing, and it really does mean the world to me, guys. It keeps the channel ad-free, and hopefully gives you something nice to listen to while you paint. Also, as we are going into 4th edition, I just wanted to give a shout out to Goonhammer, a fantastic blog online with all sorts of resources and articles to help new players and returning ones get set up, learn the rules, and start having fun right away. Now, for those of you who are new to Age of Sigmar and just jumping in with us, I see a lot of posts that are like, oh, I do 40k, but I'm jumping in with the Skaven stuff or whatever. First of all, great timing, welcome aboard. The Hour of Ruin, as we call it now, is the next big narrative arc that is sweeping the Mortal Realms. Skaventide's the box, there's different names that they have for the actual explosion itself in Akshi, but kind of the whole chapter is known as the Hour of Ruin. And that's important because it's not Skaven specific. Now, the main villains that were being featured here, of course, are the Skaven of GW fame. And they heralded in the Hour of Ruin with this titanic explosion, not far from one of the biggest cities of the Forces of Order, Hammerhal Akshi. This event was the Vermindoom. That explosion was known as the Vermindoom. So what was it? We went into a lot more detail about it during my playlist in the Dawnbringer books, but to be really brief here, over the last several narrative arcs, the focus and the goal of the Forces of Order and Destruction and stuff have been to look for realm gates and sites of natural arcane power. The term they use a lot is geomantic power. In one series, realm gates were detonated in a chain explosion, and they kind of ripped a small hole in reality, and it kind of let some of the realm of chaos bleed in. This is actually why the Stormcast had to change their armor. It's now suited to pierce through this kind of cloud of chaos. Well, through that narrative arc before, the Skaven were watching and learning. And the core idea of the Skavendoom is this. What if the Skaven set up charges all across a big area and had matching detonations in their home of Blight City? It's kind of like a little rat's warren within the realm of chaos. Or more like Unreality. It's kind of in a weird nebulous space. Archaon the Ever-Chosen, the leader who's sort of in general of the Chaos Forces, he's at least the mortal leader of them. Although they act very independently most of the time, he basically gives his blessing to the Skaven and allows them to use his authority to set all this up. Meaning the Skaven can go to other Chaos factions and say, we're serving Archaon directly, you need to do what you say, we're commandeering your tribe essentially. Now, the biggest of these chain explosions that they set up, obviously, is in Akshi, right? It's in the cinematic, a whole mountain kind of topples into nothingness, and from it, like a splinter piercing into skin, Blight City rises up to seat itself permanently as a foothold in the mortal realms. But the one thing I want to note here is that that is not the only one. And that really wasn't a note that I felt was hit very hard in the Dawnbringer books. Obviously, they're in Akshi when this is happening. But I was kind of looking for a third person, retrospective at the end where they kind of sum up the story. And it just didn't feel like they really emphasized how this affected other places. There's a lot of these things. Skaven holds have erupted all over the place. Every single realm has seen these splintered buildings and swarms of Skaven erupt upwards. And this could be for a few reasons, knowing the Skaven. It very well could be intentional, right? Holds and warpstone forges, churning out endless hordes of clan rats, marching from Blight City in their pocket of unreality into the corporeal realms, looking to devour and destroy. And essentially many different clans, which is the Skaven military structure name, had their own mini, Skavendooms wherever they could. Basically, if you had enough resources, you could cobble enough engineers to make something like this happen, and if you decided to have yours pop out in Akshi, or Giran, or Gur, well, that's just now your foothold. Your clan owns that. That's one possibility, and certainly makes it seem like a very malevolent and intelligent kind of thing. But honestly, the completely equally likely theory is that these were all intended to be raised up in Akshi and it just didn't work right. That would be hilarious to me. Which I have to imagine at least some of these things erupted nowhere near where they were intended to be, right? That's just a Skaven staple. Something will always go wrong because it's not exactly precise engineering. But I love the idea of what if they envisioned Blight City to be coming out of the mountain and this ring of fortified citadels all around it. And sure enough, Blight City is there. But all the little citadels that were supposed to be just shot off into weird directions, one just came out into the backwoods of Gur, and they're like, where is everybody? That's my own headcanon, but I love that idea. Regardless, there's Skaven all over the place. And so how does that affect everybody else? Right? Other than just getting more Skaven artwork, which is always a treat, how does this affect the main story? Well, the big one here is that the Great Horned Rat, the deity of the Skaven, has swelled immensely in power because of this move, and truly ascended to being one of the 5 true Chaos Gods. GW, in no uncertain terms, it's not the 4, and then also their rat pal. There are the 5. And it seems that Archaon the Everchosen wanted to do this, right? Remember, he was giving his blessing and his authority over to the Skaven to enact this, and his kind of gain in this scenario seems to be, one, Chaos is now ascendant again, right? They've taken back the initiative, which they haven't had since the beginning of the Realmgate Wars. But also it massively destabilizes the original 4. Remember, the OG 4 Chaos Gods, Nurgle, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, and Khorne, had their own little great game that they've always been playing. And putting a new player into that game changes a lot. Now, how that adds to his schemes long-term is something to be revealed, but that's actually why I wanted to point out in the beginning of this video that it's called the Hour of Ruin. So it's a grand chaos ascendant narrative, and I'm excited to hopefully see what Archaon does with this momentum. It's just that this chapter was kicked off specifically by the Skaven. So we know that all the bastions of order, pretty much everywhere, are being assailed by Skaven armies, or trying to be infiltrated by Ashen assassins. And I want to note here, it's not like the other factions just went away, right? Last season, the big bad was Cruel Boys, and their whole thing was they came out of the swamps and were like, we're going to wreck your stuff. Well, they're still out there. It's just that they're all fighting rats too. So it's not like we lost threats, we just gained a lot more. But this creates kind of a unique dynamic, a weird soup, as we're talking about the idea of chaos being ascendant. Right? The natural reaction to all of these armies of Skaven marching around is to stay tucked up and defended, right? You fortify a city, secure it, have a lot of lookouts, be ready for an attack. And this kind of leads us naturally into the second, I guess we'll call it the afterquake of the Skavendoom, which is corruption. The Skaven have the numbers to amass these huge armies. So many of them, the forces of order, they don't want to go out and play lightly. They need to go somewhere, capture something, destroy an army. They're not just roving around like Skaven are. So what better way to destroy these cities than to rot them away from the inside? And this is, again, why it's not Vermindoom, it's the Hour of Ruin. Skaven are the main threat that are in your face. They have all the numerical advantages. But this is a time for chaos in general, friends. Nurgle is currently, and still actively in the lore, pouring the Shudderblight Plague across Giran. Tzeentch is founding cults inside the highest echelons of society. Slaanesh pleasure cults offer an escape from the constant gloom of the outside world. Remember, you're tucked away, everyone's holding up and fortifying, there's a lot of stress. Khorne armies are running rampant, embracing any new foes, and tackling any enemy that thinks that they can pause and regroup. If you're trying to push Skaven out of your land, right, and you get them to retreat, a countercharge by a Khorne army is going to ruin your day. The explosion in Akshi was the starting pistol to this entire new era. One that was described by a GW designer as the second age of chaos. And that's the note, again, I really wanted to hit in this video. Why does it affect everybody? Because it's everywhere. Skaven are the instrument to usher this in, but this is an all-hands-on-deck moment for chaos. Archaon is trying to rock up the Pantheon, assert his control over the realms, and using powerful champions that he's accruing, like Skaven who are gaining power, obviously he has Apraxia, that kind of stuff to do it. Now, as far as what the conclusions we can draw, right, this being recorded at the very start of the edition, not knowing what kind of narrative supplements are going to come out or anything like that, I have no idea, but there are a few themes that jump out to me in the new core book that I think they could be really interesting to explore. First off, we already talked about at length the uptick in chaos. As new chaos battle tomes drop, I expect to see a glimpse of what that faction in particular is doing in the Hour of Ruin, hopefully with examples. For example, like how is when the Blades of Khorne book drops, right? And I inevitably get my amazing Korgus Cull model that you're not going to deny me, GW. But when I get this book, I want to know how Khorne is seizing the Hour of Ruin in a way that Tzeentch is not, or Nurgle is not. If you remember those like early AOS books that came out, when they would describe the Age of Chaos, right, it would just be a list of these very independent stories of how the different factions are taking over swaths of land, steamrolling the forces of order, just kind of making people flee. I essentially want that of like these various stories of how this army is functioning, but make them unique to that faction, right? Again, how is Nurgle seizing this opportunity in a way that Khorne isn't? On the note of those two characters, Khorne and Nurgle have very natural segues into the plot moving forward. Like, I would be very surprised if they were not featured in some way. No one to this day, as far as we know in the books, has beat the Shudderblight plague that's pouring all over Ghyran. This started in the first Dawnbringers book, and like the goddess of Ghyran, Alariel, the Order Pantheon of Life, and goddess of Sylvaneth, she's like counter-spelling it, like she's having like a healing rain going over at the same time, but she has not stopped that to my knowledge. So people are still being affected by it and then hoping to get cleansed later on. Now that's an easy plot thread to pull if they wanted to make it the center of a campaign. Khorne, the entire Dawnbringers Crusade series, was assaulting Hammerhall Akshi at its gates, multiple Khorne armies actually. My boy Korgus Cull leveled up, became a demon prince in the lore, that's why I joked earlier about the model. But I feel like the other two, Tzeentch and Slaanesh, didn't do as much moving and shaking in the stories. They were there, but I feel that the other two added a lot more. Not to mention that the entire forests of every realm are pretty much alive with Dark Oath tribes coming to Archaon's banner. That's a thing we haven't even touched on. Everyone is mad, like Archaon is putting the call out to everybody. And this also, because with Chaos being ascendant in the narrative, right, the main narrative, what it does to me in my mind is highlights the factions that contrast that the best. So for example, what are the Seraphon thinking? Right, their whole plan, their whole background, everything is about being anti-chaos. Anytime they're fighting something other than chaos, it's in the way of their plan to fight chaos. So what is their plan? What are they thinking? What about the Lumineth Realm Lords, right? Their whole goal, meta-wise, is to go back and patch the realms and seal off the realm of chaos. The Great Horn Rat just ripped Akshi a new blowhole. How does that factor into Teclis's plans? I have no answers for you, but like I'm really stoked to learn. And this is like what I'm talking about. Like these are just easy narrative threads that they've already laid down that are just so easy to pick up and do something with. And so we'll end this video like I end all of them. Why is this cool? What was it about the Skavendoom and ushering in the greater Hour of Ruin as a whole that's so interesting? Well, I like that Order is described as being much more prominent and established. They have towns, holds, farms. It feels like they have something to lose, which I feel like they didn't always have in the past. But what I'd love is tell me a story that's more than just the forces of Order losing land at great cost. There's so many stories that can be used for inspiration, right? Imagine, for example, a campaign book that was sort of like the AOS version of the Alamo here in the United States. Defenders encircled, you have some named characters in there to just kind of tuck inside and really just lead the show. They just need to last long enough for help to come. It's the drama of the story is what I'm saying. It doesn't just have to be towns are destroyed. I adore Skaven as the big enemy. I've said this for many years. It's GW's best fantasy intellectual property. In my opinion, they should be the Stormcast Eternals. They are the true poster boys. They have been here for so much longer than for Stormcast. Highly recognizable. I love them. But also what this means for Chaos in general. I like the game most when Chaos and Order are duking it out. Like, I know Destruction and Death are awesome. I have a Death Army myself. They each had their time in the sun, I feel. But the range of characters and stories that we get from the Cities of Sigmar and the Stormcast Eternals versus Slaves to Darkness and the war bands and their chieftains and that kind of stuff, it's just peak Warhammer to me. I adore it. I'm so excited for this next chapter of AOS, not just for the story, but also the gameplay opportunities, because I think a well-balanced game, or a game that's accessible to people, makes for a great storytelling war game, which I enjoy quite a bit. So I'm excited to start telling stories with my Flesh Eater Course here as I stare at them across from me and unravel the secrets of this new edition. If you enjoyed this video and you're not a subscriber, please consider hitting the subscribe button to stay along with all my lore content. And thank you all so much for watching and listening. Let me know your favorite part about the Skavendoom explosion and what you hope it means for your faction. I'll catch y'all next time. Happy wargaming, friends.